Welcome to ConVerses. If you're just finding this, I strongly encourage you to watch the Gospel of the Covenant series first, because there's important foundation built there that may be necessary to understand the concepts we'll be referencing as we study these apparently contradicting verses in the New Testament. Today, we're looking at Ephesians 2, 8, and 9. One of the most popular verses in Christianity. Many of you have probably known this verse since childhood. It is by grace you have been saved, through faith, and this not of yourselves. It is a gift of Elohim, not of works, so that no one should boast. While this appears straightforward, I want to point out some embedded theological assumptions that derive from the common interpretation of this verse. Number one, works equals any obedience of God's law. Number two, doing any works or obedience of God's law removes you from His grace, thereby salvation. Number three, to desire to obey the law is sin because it means you're boasting and trying to earn salvation yourself. Now, before digging into the meaning of some of these commonly misunderstood terms, let's look at our contrasting verse, directly from the mouth of Yeshua. And because lawlessness will abound, the love of many will grow cold, but he who endures to the end will be saved. That sounds like a very different perspective. Could Paul be contradicting the teaching of Yeshua? When we compare the two, here is the apparent contradiction. Paul teaches that man's works have no part in being saved because it's free to anyone who makes a mental agreement or a statement of faith. But Yeshua claims that man's law-breaking precludes one from loving God and suggests that is a condition to being saved. Now, you'll need to have watched the Gospel Series Part 3 video to get a better understanding of these terms, but I'm going to repeat them here for a quick review. First, it is by grace you have been saved. So what exactly is grace? The first time this word appears in the Bible is in Genesis. Noah found grace in the eyes of Adonai. The Hebrew for grace is chen. It means a favor or approval or seen as precious or special. And Noah lived far from the eventual place known as Jerusalem, and didn't have sin sacrifices, or Yeshua. But apparently people living at that time could have received grace under Adonai. But how? The next verse tells us, Noah was righteous and perfect in his generation. The term righteous here in Hebrew is the form tzaddik, and it means someone or something that is in a right legal standing. And there's a second descriptor of Noah here as well. Noah was righteous and perfect in his generation. Perfect here is the Hebrew word tamim, and means to be whole or wholesome, as in blameless and innocent. So according to what standard or status was Noah innocent? This word is anciently Hebraically understood to be the attitude or intention of one's heart and mind, where your human will is fully dedicated to Adonai's purpose and kingdom. So Noah was seen as in right legal standing according to Elohim's current operating administration in the world, and his spirit was wholly blameless in his heart and mind's intention. But intention to do what? Go to the last phrase of the verse. Noah walked with Elohim. So Noah received grace, special approval from Adonai, because he was deemed righteous, in legal right standing before Adonai, because he was perfect, or wholly blameless in his desire to walk with Adonai, because he walked with Adonai, which includes doing whatever actions are commanded by this covenant authority to remain in right legal standing, including whatever mechanism is provided to cover your error of impurity, both of heart and action. Now back to Ephesians. All of this defines how to be saved. What does saved mean? The Greek that Paul uses is from the root sozo, which means to deliver from danger or to escape. This is the Greek word used in the Septuagint in Genesis 19 when the angel commands Lot to escape with your life. It's also used in Deuteronomy 33 when Moses declares, "Who is like you, O Israel, a people saved by Adonai?" Saved means to be rescued from death and delivered into Adonai's covenant blessing. And believe it or not, Paul's terminology is only defined by the Torah and prophets, the word he fully professes to abide by in Acts 24. Therefore, the Ephesians 2 verse could be understood like this: It is by favored approval you have been rescued from death outside covenant, through steadfast trust in his legal substitution, and that not of yourselves. It is the gift of Elohim, no longer by your physical actions of Levitical sacrifice, so that no man should trust in his own physical offering as covenantal access, because the required method of representative covering was restored from the blood of an animal in the temple to spiritual blood on the altar of heaven where our true life is accounted for. We can't continue to offer animals in our place anymore, or in other words, do the works or actions of this element previously required to remain legally in the covenant. And why? Because it's not legally accepted as the manner of covering anymore. So what do we do now? The next verse makes it clear. Ephesians 2:10, we are Elohim's making, created in Messiah Yeshua unto good works, which Elohim prepared in advance that we should walk in them. Through Yeshua's elevation of our access point into the presence of Adonai, coming via his heavenly provided lamb and spiritual priestly mediation, all men can be added into this covenant people, despite their geography or bloodline. Therefore, we can do what his covenant people do. The instructions or works that he set up in advance that would keep people in right legal standing of that saving covenant. What instructions were prepared before Yeshua came that we were told to walk in? And keep the charge of Adonai your Elohim to walk in his ways, to keep his statutes, commandments, ordinances, and decrees, as is written in the Torah of Moses, so that you may prosper in all you do. How do I know that I'm not completely misreading Paul? Look at the contrasting verse we introduced from Matthew, where Yeshua says, "Many false prophets will appear and lead many astray, and because lawlessness will abound, the love of many will grow cold. But he who endures to the end will be saved." Lawlessness is not the term for generic unruly behavior. We're not talking about jaywalking. This word nomos is almost always translated as the law of God, the Torah. Yeshua is declaring that when the religious masses get deceived by anti-Torah teaching, their love will diminish. Why? Because how does Elohim define love? It's written dozens of times throughout the New Testament, even in the crystal clear words of Yeshua in John 14. If you love me, obey my commandments. So if Yeshua is connecting the continuance of Torah obedience to the ones who will remain after the judgment, which is to be saved, then we might have to reconsider the complete idea of salvation according to the Son of God. Let's use our restored understanding of biblical terms and ideas to translate the verse like this. Because rebellion against the Torah will increase, the covenant obedience of many will diminish. But he who endures to the end will be delivered from death that comes when outside of covenant with Adonai. So just as it was for the ancient Israelites, if you reject the terms of the covenant in which Adonai promises your provision, protection, and life in the land, then you are removed from the covenant. As the language of the Torah puts it, if you refuse to obey my laws and commands and break the covenant I have made with you, I will appoint you for destruction. Could it be any clearer? Now, one last piece of this Matthew 24 verse. What does it mean to endure until the end? The Greek word end here is the same as the famously misunderstood and mistranslated verse in Romans 10:4, where it says, Messiah is the end of the law for the righteousness of the one who believes. The word is translated from telos, and it is not about ending as in terminating something. It is the defined point, goal, or purpose of something, like a target. Just as the Messiah embodied the goal or purpose of the Torah, because by obeying it fully, he modeled how to live as a fully spirit-filled man. And we are instructed to walk just as he did, so that we can live in legal right standing according to the covenant we have been given free access into through Yeshua. Which is why he declares in my annotated translation, the one who remains doing this goal or purpose, which is covenant obedience, is the one who will be saved. There it is. These two verses we contrasted are 100% congruent. Paul teaches that man's works of Levitical sacrifice have no part in granting you access into the covenant that brings salvation. That blood covering is provided through faith in Adonai's offering of Yeshua. And once we enter that covenant, we are to live by its established terms, the non-Levitical Torah instruction. And Yeshua prophesies that false teachers will deceive the ones freely entering into covenant by his offering, to think that no obedience of covenant terms are expected, but only the ones who remain faithful in covenantal obedience will be rescued from judgment and enter the kingdom of God. Now, let's revisit the theological assumptions from the beginning and see if we can correct them with a more complete biblical perspective. Works, in Paul's writings, sometimes refers to Levitical acts of the sacrificial system, and sometimes refers to the obedience of God's law for all men. Context from his Hebrew Bible perspective is required. Doing the works prepared for us keeps you in legal right standing in his covenant, which is salvation. To obey the law of God is the literal opposite of sin. The desire to obey it is the primary purpose of the Spirit of God dwelling with us. It is always his provision that makes salvation possible. As a final thought, Paul urges later in the same letter to Ephesians to walk worthy of this calling. First, if by grace in Ephesians 2 truly means that Yeshua's offering is also in lieu of your obedience for the rest of your life, and no expectation of any covenanted member is desired, then why would Paul charge the people to walk in a manner deserving of it? If there's a way to walk in which you are seen as deserving something, it is not the sort of free we've been led to believe. Now, please listen closely. I am not saying that the gift of the access to the covenant can be earned. That is the amazing grace provided by Yeshua's representation in the eternal court of heaven on our behalf. What I am saying, and yet not me, but Yeshua and Paul are saying, is that the eternal terms of the covenant are required for those who have entered in it through that trusted act, in order to remain in legal right standing as fully committed citizens of the kingdom of heaven. Second, in the Ephesians 4:1 verse, the term calling is the Greek word klesis. This was culturally used to imply the invitation to a feast. For those of you who understand the Moedim, the appointed times of Adonai, this will be incredibly significant, as if Yeshua and Paul are connecting the entire idea that those who remain faithful in his covenant and obedience of the Torah until the appointed time will be the ones called to the feast. And what feast, you may ask? Well, likely Sukkot, or the Feast of Tabernacles, as Messiah ushers in his restored kingdom according to the biblical timeline, where all prophetic events coincide with Adonai's holy days and times. This is what is referenced in Revelation 19 as the marriage supper of the Lamb. But that's enough to consider for now. I encourage you to share this and to study it with trusted seekers of the Word, and subscribe to catch the next episode. Until next time, let's pray for the mercy of Adonai to open our eyes to His truth and for the courage to walk in it. Shalom.